Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us here on The Conversation, brought to you by the Namibian. Now, over the last few weeks, we've seen a conversation come from social media that is from the Windhoek Mayor, Job Amupanda, and the presidency's spokesperson, also the press secretary, Alfredo Hengari. Now, the conversation stemmed from what we know as the outstanding municipal bills, but it rose a question of the role of social media compared to the normal processes, as Dr. Hengari has pointed out, as the systems, processes, and institutions there. Now, today we have both of the gentlemen in the studio to have a conversation about it. And I'd just like to point out that we do have screens here to allow for the guests to take off their masks and ensure that we curb the spread of COVID-19. As you can see, the mayor wants to illustrate that there is a screen and that will allow for the safety of all of us in the studio. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us. You may take off your masks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shelley, for inviting me to the conversation. But I must first preface the actual conversation by saying that when I was initially invited, I was not informed that I'll be in a conversation with the mayor. But nonetheless, I welcome the conversation. I think it's important that we talk about these issues.
Yeah, I think it should go from social media to, the public space. It should go beyond that. It shouldn't just stay on social media. And I think over the last few weeks, we've seen what people have perceived as now tension between the press secretary and the mayor. And that's something that we need to clear in terms of that. But let's just start off with the basis.
Absolutely. I think maybe before we proceed, you mentioned, I don't really want us to have this conversation and say that there is tensions between myself and my good doctor. I have huge respect for him, and I think I had my own introspection, like it's some people had their introspection. Sometimes you look at yourself and things that you have done wrong, and I really just want to apologize to doctor. I think I've been so hard on him, so I brought this from Café La Paris. It's a gift for him as an apology in case I might have been so hard to him. But there is no bad blood.
No, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Because I think there was a perceived tension, and that's what we want to clear here. We won't. Perhaps we can just put this on the side.
I think the whole idea of a salad, we know where it comes from.
Yeah.
From 2017, the mass salad type of story. So I think you can keep the salad. I think we know where it comes from.
Yeah.
We know where it comes from.
Yeah.
2017 mass salad.
It was a good one.
Okay.
All right, let's get into it. Perhaps, Bianca, you can just have...
No, we can leave it there. It would inspire...
Yeah, no, we don't want to take away from the conversation. That is it. Thank you very much.
A salad won't be a problem, would it?
Yeah, let's get into it. Yes, perhaps the mayor can just say, when we look at what's happened, what was your motive behind taking the conversation from what we know as normal conversation, messages, calls between institutions, to going to social media? And it wasn't just one platform, it was multiple platforms where you did communicate and say, these ministries' bills are outstanding. What was your motive behind it?
Well, I think we must be able to understand, I'm an activist for social justice. So the basis of the very concept of social justice is also to say that people shouldn't really be discriminated on the basis of whatever status they have, be it rich, be it poor, be it whatever status that they may have in society, be it they have no access to formal processes. I'm on social media. My Instagram has 120,000 followers. My Twitter page has 70,000, and all these places I've been communicating ever since. In fact, the Section 11, subsection 5 of the Local Authority Act says that the mayor shall be accountable to the residents of the particular local authority. So if the residents of Windhoek are on Facebook, I will go to Facebook. If the residents of Windhoek are on the Herero Mall, I will go to Herero Mall. Wherever the residents are, I will be able to go there. And I think I don't actually value the discussion about social media, and because this conversation doesn't begin now. When I was part of Southwest Africa, they used to call it book face. They used to say, yeah, these youth are discussing issues on book face. This was President Pohamba. And we say, no, that's where young people are. 60% of this population is young. So we defied that. And we went to social media, and majority of cabinet ministers and everybody else, including the president, and I'm told that the president is also watching this conversation, and I'm very happy that the president is also following, and I ask him not to be too harsh on doctor, because what is about to happen has nothing to do with doctor. President, enjoy the conversation, and everybody else, cabinet ministers that are watching. So there is no qualm about social media. I think I would even conclude that maybe doctor is misunderstood. I don't think doctor would necessarily be against social media. I was also very shocked, by the way, and to read that, and I think maybe he must have been misunderstood, but he's here to speak for himself.
Yeah,
I'm not his spokesperson.
Yeah, that's something I want to get on, but before we do get in, we do get the doctor's conversation on social media. Doctor, you spoke of, and I want to get your direct words when you put it out there. You said it's regrettable that the affairs of the city of Windhoek are run through a social media account of a councillor. It undermines our systems, processes and institutions, a hallmark of effective governance in Namibia. When you speak of the processes, the systems and institutions, what do you mean by that? Let's start there.
Yeah, let me say that politics, governance is not theater. It's about the lives of people. It's not entertainment. It's a serious business. And over the past 30 years, following a century of oppression, of brutality by first the German colonial occupying forces and later apartheid South Africa, our systems were decimated. We did not have forms of governance that responded to the needs of the majority. From 1990, after the Namibian revolution, from 1990, we achieved a revolution in 1990.
Namibian revolution?
Yes, we had a revolution in this country, and we completed that revolution in 1990. Let me just continue.
Yeah.
So the past 30 years, able men and women painfully and skillfully worked on governance, including this city where we are, where I'm a resident. The caution is that we should not turn the bread and butter issues of governance of Namibians into a theater. That is the caution. Therefore, when there are serious matters that ought to be raised with ministries, offices, and agencies, the city of Windhoek has a clear communication policy. It has clear systems, processes, through which communication should be channeled to whatever office. Could be the presidency as well. So we don't want to see a situation where, in a very casual manner, things are thrown on social media for entertainment to Twitter revolutionaries. So that is really unwelcome.
Yeah. Doctor, can I just hand on something you said there? You spoke of it being thrown on social media. We've over the years seen the stories of City of Windhoek cutting off ministries' supply to water and electricity. We've seen it over the years, and it was thrown on social media by the media. What makes it different? Is it because it's a specific councillor?
But there's a difference between the media communicating decisions of the City of Windhoek and the mayor, a councillor of the City of Windhoek, communicating serious business of the City of Windhoek in a very casual manner. And at times also with the clear intention to malign, to demean corporate citizens of this country. And also citizens. This cuts to the heart of our democracy, what it is becoming. And I have to emphasize, really, it's a very serious matter. Our democracy is at stake when we are very casual, when we demean, when we malign, instead of dealing with issues in a manner that is principled, that is serious, and that speaks to the urgency of the situation at hand and the demands of our citizens, of the residents of the city.
Wait, before you start, and I know you already have a response to that, but let me ask you. When the doctor says it was in such a casual manner, we heard how he described it, do you agree that that was your intention when you did post it on social media, first of all? And that's why I firstly asked you, what was your motive of having that discussion on social media?
I think one of the things that we must begin to be very clear here is to be able to move from artificial sophistication to real practical things. When you say, when you dig that, what is that? You must be able to say, on this date at this time, this was said. So all we're just being theoretical about things all over. In fact, as I'm sitting here, I don't actually know what is the issue. What is it that was posted by the mayor in whatever things like that? But can you learn the basic skills of debate? I never interrupted you. I kept quiet and you finished.
I'm
not going to.
It's a footnote.
Hey,
it's a footnote.
Hey, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So no. Let's be very clear here. Let's set.
Slow. Each one has a set time. Let the
No.
speak.
I'm very serious. I take time to come to this conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to be distracted here.
No, I'm saying
What
you
I'm
have
saying,
time to speak.
yes, what I'm saying,
Yeah.
the basic skills of debate, you allow another person to debate, advance their point, then you don't interject as if we are in high school. Now, back to what I was saying. So, for the conversation to be meaningful, we must be factual. What is the issue that has been said? But what is very clear here is that there's a fundamental difference between myself and the press secretary. And he's talking about system, process, and institution. So what the philosophical orientation of people like him is that you must fit in, you must wear a suit like him. And in fact, they would even argue that I'm wearing a t-shirt and you have a vest and then a shirt and then a tie and then a suit on top of it. You must actually put on that aircon. So, because it might be hot for him. So the difference is about form and substance. So what they are busy focusing is on form, not substance. It's on form. What are you posting? What are you dressed on? Why are you not wearing the chain? Why are you protocols and things like that? So one of the first things, without even wasting time to dilly-dally with those things, that I admit and I accept that I'm different. I belong to the generation that is different. The generation of young men and women who wants to be communicated to on Facebook, on Twitter, in the street, in the club, everywhere where they are. I'm not apologetic about that. If the presidency and everybody else think that because they have done that for 30 years, and therefore we must continue with that narrative, it's not going to happen. And I hope that we can find really psychologists to counsel them so that they get to a stage where they just accept that we're not going to change. So there is not really issue about casuality. And what is casual? What is the alternative to casual? It's formal, isn't it? Like you go there, you back down with protocol and things. I don't belong to that generation. I belong to the generation of young men and women who want things to change. We must change the 30 years of misrule. In the past 30 years of flag independence, the city of Windhoek have never paid NAM-Power and brought it to zero. We are now at zero balance for the first time in 30 years. How did that happen? It's because we decided, no, we don't care whether you are president, whether you are so-and-so, whether you are and so we are going to cut. And in fact, this is very funny. You know the conversation about State House. That's why I'm asking you and him to be very specific. You are just hearing the mayor posted, the mayor said it, but no one tells you what exactly did the mayor say. But let me help you enlighten the conversation. Minister Schlettwein on Facebook posted about the city of Windhoek. And I would have thought that he posted serious matters on social media, to which I responded, because he's speaking about the city of Windhoek. And in terms of Section 11, subsection 5 of the Local Authority Act, I'm the principal head of the city of Windhoek that has been mentioned by Harambe Minister. So what do? I respond to him and said, but you have been a Minister of Finance. Care to explain to me, how did you allow State House to end up owing? There was no mayor who went to communicate about that. It was in response to Schlettwein. The evidence is there. That is why for us to really, because remember the people are watching and his boss is also watching this conversation. So we need to be very factual. What are we talking about? casualty and what has been posted where. And of course, I'm just saying it to be able to say, first I said we are going to continue with social media. There's nothing they can do. But also to be responsible enough to engage the very question. And what is the very question? Is to say these allegations about what is being posted. So there is no issue here. This is really a storm in a cup of tea.
If I can just come in there, I think the issue is not that it's a storm. Like we began the conversation is that we are trying to have a conversation about it, put it out there. When we talk about social media, as you said, we have a generation that sort of is still trying to fathom how to use social media. And we have the younger generation who has fathomed it, sort of trying to perfect it now.
Absolutely.
If we look at communication in the formal side, let's like office bearers included, we have, let's say for instance, State House. Instances we've had last year was that some of the journalists, and earlier this year as well, where journalists would find out about a press conference first on Facebook and then we got the invitations later. That is communication on social media. Yes, Doctor, let me get to my question and then I'll come to you. If we talk about social media, is social media still a place for just socializing? Or can we come to a point and fathom the fact that social media has become a communication platform, whether it's formal or casual?
Let me start backwards, I think, with you. We communicate institutionally. The social media sites of the presidency, not of Alfredo Hengari. I don't communicate, I don't invite the media or I don't inform the public about matters concerning a serious institution like the presidency on my private Twitter handle. That is the key point about governance. This is not about extremes. I think the conversation is about convergence. It's not about air-conditioned offices where the mayor sits on that expensive building on the hill. He sits in there, he never rejected it. He has 2 cars, a Mercedes-Benz E-Class 2018 model with proper aircon, nice comfortable seats. No minister in this country has a car like his. Theirs are older. He has a 2018 model, E-Class. He talks about elites, again in a manner that is casual. He is an elite. Because if I were to ask him, what is the definition of an elite? He fits that definition, 120%. Maybe some of the followers on Twitter, they are not aware about these things. But we have a responsibility to educate them that contradictions are very dangerous. They are first internal before they are external. They're internal. So we are dealing with contradictions, labeling others, whereas we're enjoying the very same things on a daily basis. His office, where he talks about air condition and my suit and so on, is impeccable. But he might want to hide it to the Twitter community and so on. But it is there, it's a reality. But that's not the point. That's not the point. That's the form. That's form that he's talking about. He's obsessed with form.
Substance.
We're interested in the substance of governance. We don't talk about air-conditioned offices. We don't talk about elites. Because we know that he's an elite. His allowance on a monthly basis from the city of Windhoek, which he never rejected, and said, no, I'm going to give it to the masses of our people. It's 11,000 on a monthly basis. On top of that, he gets sitting allowances. This man is an elite. We should accept it. And he should accept it. He should live with that contradiction. It's okay. Mao Zedong wrote extensively about contradictions. The Marxists talk about contradiction. So we have to accept that. So now let's talk about serious matters of governance here. Okay. As opposed to, these things about form, elites, and a revolution and all these things. I mean, in fact, Fidel, a leading revolutionary, he never talked to himself, I'm a revolutionary. He would say, I'm a Marxist, Leninist. But he never spoke about himself in that format. because he understood the consequences of what it means to be a revolutionary. He has done it, been a done that. So our conversations as Namibians should be focused on the essential aspects of service delivery, doing better for Namibians, as opposed to personality clashes, as opposed to Hengari this, Amupanda that. No, Namibians don't want that. They want us to focus on issues that affect them. In this country, over the past 30 years, the successes are many, but we recognize the challenges. And it is why, on a daily basis, we try and make sure that one Namibian, the life of one Namibian improves, one at a time.
Yes. When we speak of governance, still didn't answer my question when we speak about, does social media fit into governance?
Please, I mean, the very, we can decide to be petty, and I think you carry a serious responsibility, you as a moderator. We can decide, I don't have a problem with, I'm comfortable in being me and who I am. We can decide to be petty. Before you came to this studio, you went for a haircut and you didn't pay your barber. This is what he writes to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't pay him and you want to pay him $50 instead of, so we can decide to be petty. That's why I'm saying you carry a responsibility.
Amupanda.
That's why I'm saying we can. I'm just.
I hear what you're saying.
You should not
But
tell
if you
lies.
just, yeah.
But
If you
doctor,
do
no
that-
wait.
If you don't get angry, don't get
Mayor,
angry.
Mayor Secretary.
Don't get
But it is
angry.
okay.
Don't get angry. Just relax.
Mayor.
Drink water.
Press Secretary, allow me to come in there. Allow me to come in there.
Relax.
Thank you very much. Allow me to come in there. And yes, that was going to a very low level. And I understand that it is personal attacks going on. But the conversation here today is, what I asked you was the basis of the conversation. When we speak about governance, does social media fit into governance, and how does it?
Yes.
Perhaps you can then go on, because you brought up a point of private pages versus official pages. Let's go off of that basis then, and then we can get to these theatrics.
There are two important revolutions, because we need to get serious as well, as opposed to the pettiness of that has been a hallmark of the conversations. We need to move beyond that. If you have a PhD, if you say you're educated, if you say people are charlatans, we have to be exemplary in the public conversation. That's very important, and I take that seriously. I take that quite seriously, because especially when you are proud of them, when you parade them, when you say you have this, it's very important. I did not dispute the importance of social media over the past decade. In fact, there are two important revolutions that we've seen over the past 20 years. It's biotech and infotech. They are transforming the lives of people in profound ways. I'm the first to admit and to also appreciate the fact that democracy has shifted from traditional platforms to online platforms. I understand that quite clearly, but I also understand the implications of that for governance, the implications of that for democracy. That I fully understand. And that is why the caution, especially when you have public office, when you have a position of responsibility, the caution with which you should use those platforms in an age of misinformation, fake news, disinformation, and many other ills that are impacting adversely the quality of democracy. And I think it's to that level and to that challenge that we should rise when we are talking about governance, effective governance in particular. We should not look at things in terms of extremes. I'm not an extremist, because I believe the world is not about extremes, it's about convergence. That's the lesson, the key lesson that we must learn is convergence, is to accept that the extremes of yesterday will not take us into the future. The future is about convergence. It's about the middle ground. It's an important lesson for governance and for the progress of countries.
Yeah. Let me just
Can I
once
give my
again,
take on governance?
No, definitely you can. But I would just like to remind both gentlemen here, we have a duty to the Namibian nation to have a conversation.
Absolutely.
Have a conversation based on, yes, it's very tempting to have the attacks, and when someone does come to you, have the little disputes we just had now, personal attacks going around. We have a duty to have a conversation here. And the conversation that we want to have here is, what I'm getting here is the difference between the old and the new age. And you did mention convergence, and that's where we're heading. Life constantly is converging. Absolutely. We're constantly seeing change, but we need to get to a point where we have two different minds, two different ideologies here. We need to get to a point where we can have a conversation and invite both of those ideologies here without one being more superior than the other one. Absolutely. So let us get to a point where we realize we have a duty to have a proper conversation and not let our personal conversation and attacks get to that point where we don't even have a productive and informative conversation firstly. So yeah, on that basis, the doctor gave his thoughts on governance and social media and how we getting to a point of converging it and seeing it being an official platform instead of what is now known, but in Namibia mostly, as a social platform. Dr. Mayor, you can go ahead.
Let's be absolutely clear. 60% of this population is young in this country. This is the generation that I belong to. It's a generation of young men and women with talent and energy who feels and believe that things should change. Things should change from what? We are one of the most unequal nations on the face of the earth. 900,000 Namibians live in the informal settlements. In Windhoek alone, that number is about 100,000. I spend a lot of time in the informal settlements. And what those young men and women want and hope is for the system to change for the better, is for their lives to be impacted practically. They don't even trust this thing called systems and processes. Yeah? They don't even trust the existing machinery. So one of the first things that happened when we got into this leadership position is that there's a serious attempt, that's what we also see as also part of this conversation, serious attempt to transform he or she that now enter the systems, process and institution. But I belong to the generation that says that if the system, process and institution do not work for us, they must be defended by those that work for it. We want to meet the needs of our people at the point of need. That is why, for example, from the city of Windhoek where we stand, for the first time in 30 years, we brought about a concept of pre-allocation. Yeah? So what we are interested to see is a thorough analysis of what exists. Yeah? Landlessness, homelessness. So we do a serious analysis of why is it, for instance, that from 1990 to 2015, the city of Windhoek only serviced about 96 residential plots in Katutura and all the sites. Ne? So when we come there with our orientation, and say, what are the factors that cause, in the context of governance, to respond to specifically to your question, what caused the city of Windhoek for about 25 years to only service 96 plots in Katutura and service about 2,000 plots on this other side? So it's when you begin to understand that the elite pact that has been concluded between east and west of Windhoek. So you now have to do an intervention. But let's deal with this fallacy and approach to interpreting governance narrowly. When we speak about fighting the elite and the elite context, Friedrich Engels and Karl Marx were not poor. So this whole idea that you must be extremely poor in order to fight for people, it's again that very culture that perpetuates the sufferings, us and them. You know that the people in the informal settlements, because of the limitation to the condition, will never be able to do that. So one of the things that we must be clear, and it's talking about convergence. Let's agree to disagree. Yeah, that's also part of convergence. And when we say let's agree to disagree, what are we agreeing to disagree on? Is that He can be in his suits. I can be in the cab. A young man, when he sees me in a cab, it's not that I cannot afford a suit that he has. This is what are always mistaken about. But let there be somebody to whom this young person can engage. So they can keep the systems and processes and institutions. But all we are saying as a generation of activists, is that we are not going to be subjected to some processes. If the city disconnects water for a person in the informal settlement, for Shiligan and her mother, the city must also be able to disconnect the state house. So this whole notion to say a very, very, very important institution. Yes, state house is very important. But those that are employed in government, if they understood that state house is a very important institution, they ought to take responsibility and make sure that this very, very important institution does not place itself in a position that it was placed in. So responsibility, even in the context of governance, doesn't always happen when something happens. Responsibility, even if this narrative of process and institution, it means these guys ought to sit back and say, how do we best protect this very institution that we have? They fail to do that dismally. So this conversation, you can clearly see that this is a system. We have been here in 30 years for the revolution, and we never had a revolution. We had the revolutionary situation. Yeah? There's a revolutionary situation and a revolutionary outcome. The revolutionary outcome is what leads to a revolution. What we had, the antagonistic forces in Namibia, the apartheid forces and the liberation movement, were in a revolutionary situation, aiming to liquidate one another. The end result was not what has happened in Cuba. The revolutionaries never went into the CBDs with their guns to declare independence. Those antagonistic forces, the liberation movement and the apartheid forces, came to the negotiation table, and they sold out on the land question to keep the economy and things like that. You cannot have a negotiated settlement and end up calling it a revolution. We never had a revolutionary outcome in this country. But this is what we are saying, is that let there be a situation where we agree to disagree. Yeah? We belong to the generation, and we're not going to waver. We want, of course, ultimately, if there are unjust processes, unjust institutions, unjust systems, we have no responsibility. We have no moral responsibility whatsoever to respect the system that loot, that steal from the masses of our people. To respect the system that has created a joke of our country. How can you just go, you are now mayor, communicate like this, write a letter? We can even write an email to the president. If I have a president's number, or I could even WhatsApp, he does WhatsApp with the president. So we must actually even move to a stance where a mayor can WhatsApp a resident called the president. And in fact, that's where I want to stretch the conversation. And he will be very shocked to say, no, we can't have a president on WhatsApp. I'm sure there must be a cabinet WhatsApp group. Yeah. There is a cabinet WhatsApp. So the story about Facebook and things like, you must also see it in terms of a generation that they failed. That generation that they failed is now enforcing us to be able to send. And this is what Dr. had written beautifully in 2015, because obviously as young scholars we read and followed, and this is what he says: without a doubt, the problem lies with another generation that benefited handsomely from independence. This is a generation which had the luxury of studying with university scholarship and not loans. Mm-hmm. It is a generation that includes the educated and uneducated grabbing opportunities to prosper in their endeavors that they undertook because independence provided both ethical and unchecked unethical flourishing. This is his own words. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Even at the height of a palpable tension between government and the youth, in its own material interest to seek favors with one side, this generation used whatever. He's talking about our generation now.
No.
I'm reading. You want to
read, but I'm not talking.
Let me read.
Okay, but read.
Are you saying I'm not reading correctly?
You got me wrong.
No,
but continue.
You can see what I'm reading.
You got me wrong. But
no, I was even about to finish. Okay.
The last sentence.
Yes. This generation used whatever available tools at its disposal to support or discount this or that position of the AR. Yeah. That failed generation now. Yes. it did not speak to or with the AR youth, but against it. Yeah. So the idea about generational contradictions have already been acknowledged even by Doctor himself. He says that that generation that got scholarships failed to solve the land question, the housing question, and all the problems. Then came this generation of the affirmative repositioning movement. And he says, in his own writing, in this newspaper of this, the Namibian, and he says, their generation failed to understand, and they only oppose what the AR movement stood for, particularly that dichotomy between AR and government in 2015. So when he says that that generation failed, their generation failed. Yeah. So what is very clear in conclusion at this conversation is that these are generational antagonism, and if we have to find convergence, one of the first things that we must do, we must begin where he ended with that conversation, that one generation failed, and this generation that appears to be playing outside the rules. In fact, one of his articles was that we must reposition AR into some republic notions. He's always been advocating us to be in the system, pro-system, and to operate within the rules of engagement. And we refuse. Yes. And that is the basis of the conversation.
Can I just come in there? So the conversation, it seems like we're getting somewhere without the little attacks there. But what the doctor has also, or what the press secretary has admitted to, there is convergence over the time. There is, things will change. That's how life works. But the change that he is referring to is outside of the lines of what we know as the norm. Yes. But if we look at how things have been playing out, it's been unveiling itself. We have seen, first, we didn't have the media on social media. We just had the media in a writing and broadcast. We have the media on social media now. We have that constant flow of it. And we see offices, your office and your office, both have platforms there and communicate with the residents. And sort of what we known as sort of the institution, the media, and the public. You now have curbed sort of the media and gone to the public itself. You understand? But we can't cry foul when it comes to this process. You've rightfully admitted there is convergence and things have changed. But let me just get back to the conversation. Do you then, if we have to have the conversation about convergence and we have to say that we are modernizing and changing and we need to adapt to it, the processes that we have, haven't they already adapted to what's happening? How do we then get to a point of realizing access to information no longer is what the official offices define it as to be? Access to information has now created itself to where we have people going to different places to seek access to information, to have the very service delivery that you spoke about.
Yeah, I think let me just caution that in as much as we might want to be unconventional, supposedly out of the box, but the caution here is against informality, because informality is not good for governance. It's not good for service delivery. It's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable option. Informality it could be an individual style. I want to, operate in this office in a manner that is informal. But it's not how governance works. Governance is about building credible institutions. Now, on the question of the past 30 years, and I like the fact that my little brother prepared quite well for this conversation, and I accept.
But I can just be called little.
Okay, my
resident.
Okay, my brother, he's come of age. He's come of age, and I'm glad about that because partly I appreciate the fact that he's been reading diligently the stuff that I've been writing. Absolutely. And he's also gone on record to defend me publicly some of the writings that I've put out there. But the key point that we should understand is that when I speak about some of the failures of my generation, it speaks exactly to the type of conversations that we should have. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation because in a way, it's also part of as someone who's older than him, It's a process of mentoring. It's a process of co-constitution. It's about that. It's about us learning from each other, him learning new things, and also learning how to do things a certain way. Because that is what is sustainable in a republic. I'm just trying to say the sanity lies in convergence and not in extremes. No society has developed on the basis of extremes. Now, you are maybe too young to have seen Namibia before independence. I've lived in this country at the height of apartheid. I was old enough to see what Katutura was. I was born in Katutura. I know what Katutura was like. I know what Katutura is like today. The tarred roads, the lights, a number of infrastructures. There are challenges. There's no question about that. And we are trying to address some of these challenges in a manner that is systematic and not necessarily, and not informal, because you cannot address problems. Because a state is a highly complex, it's a highly complex construct. So you cannot manage it in a manner that is whimsical, in a manner that speaks to your individual preferences, in a manner that speaks to.
I hear you, doctor.
Let me just.
But for the sake of
let me just go to the bottom of my thinking.
Okay, yes, please.
In a manner that is informal. So over the past 30 years, the successes of this country, they are quite notable. Namibia is one of the best governed countries in Africa. We're in the top 6. Last year, the Mo Ibrahim Foundation released a report on African governance. In that report, it says that Namibia is one of the countries that over a period of 7 years has made progress on the foundations of economic opportunity. This year, Transparency International, just 2 weeks ago, released a report as well on the Corruption Perception Index, because it's fashionable to brandish, the word corruption and say people are corrupt and so on. But the facts, they tell a different story. Namibia is, once again, over a period of 8 years, one of the countries that have moved the needle on the question of governance. Namibia sits in the 33% of countries out of 180 countries globally that have made progress in terms of fighting corruption. Now, let me just speak briefly.
Yes,
briefly.
Please, because there's a point I want to touch on.
Briefly,
you touched on.
Briefly, to the past 5 years under the Harambee Prosperity Plan, the progress we've made. Young people, under Harambee Prosperity Plan, we committed to put about 16,000 young people in TVETs, vocational and education training centers. 16,000, we committed, but we put 35,000 of young people into those entities. Under HPP, we committed to service 26,000 Evans across the country. We narrowly missed that target by reaching 23,000. On housing, we wanted to deliver 20,000 units. On governance, 20,000 units. We are on the question of governance. 20,000 units, but we did 16,000. So I think we should not talk about this country. We should not. We should not talk about Namibia as if this country is some kind of a joke.
Yes. Wait. No. Let's get to that before you get to that point. You mentioned. We should not forget about how the formal side of things and how things are done. If we look at the extremes we spoke about, if we look at, let's take an example from New Zealand. First woman prime minister, first of all, that could have been considered an extreme 5-10 years ago. Secondly, we have
maybe 50 years ago.
No, even 10 years ago, we could have had the same discussion. And also for
we've done well on gender anyway. So
yes, but for that matter, when we speak about extremes, we have that same prime minister sitting in official capacity breastfeeding. That is considered, that was also considered an extreme at some point. When we speak about extremes, we need to speak about it in a manner of the current context. What do we call extreme in 2021, where we have the media finding out, for instance, about certain things on social media? Well, we have a lot of extremes in this world, yes. But if we're talking about formality and informality, where do we get there? But
let me answer that.
Where do we speak about extremes? And yes, no one has not recognized the process, the progress Namibia has made. And speaking about failure in terms of where we are as a country now, we've had people also around the country, and it's African presidents themselves. It is leadership activists, young and old, come and say that we have seen progress in certain African countries, including Namibia. Do you still then agree with the notion that previous generation completely failed, or is it that they didn't live up to a standard that they needed to live up to get there? And then this conversation has gone past where we are. I also want to ask you something, and after, please, very brief answer there. We need to get to our viewers' questions. They have questions for both of you, so please do get on to that.
Well, I mean, you allowed him to digress.
I also did you allow to digress?
To digress.
Okay. Both of you
Look,
digress.
Let's be very clear here.
Yeah.
The Namibia is a capitalist society. The government of the day over the past 30 years pursue neoliberal policies that this government defends. If everything was well, I mean, it's foolish. I mean, if you build a house there and you just sit back and admiring, oh, this house, the windows are nice. What is being asked of us here? No one, it's not possible it's not possible for anyone to say nothing has happened. It means that there were no human beings that were there. But as young men and women who are interested in the future, we are not interested in awards and tapping ourselves, yeah, we've achieved, we've done so. Ibrahim said this, Ibrahim, what? You must just check how many of your relatives here were retrenched. How many of them lost their jobs? Yeah, we've been, I think before the Harambee escapade began in 2015, we've had economic growth, but jobless growth. You know, when you do an analysis, a total analysis, I'm not talking about this petty thing, this is what was said here, this is what was said here. The Constitution of the Republic of Namibia in Article 95 of our Constitution speaks about the basis of economic policy, the so-called mixed economy. We must also be very careful about this convergence. When people talk about convergence ideologically, it is apparently there is some place. You know, power dynamics are always determined. Ne? So when we are converging, at whose place are we converging? Who's preparing that festival of convergence? We've been given a raw deal. No? They drafted the Constitution and say that the principles of economic policy shall be a mixed economy. Now, Sangula, just before he left office, there's an admission that it's a capitalist economy that follows neoliberal policy. He admitted that in writing. President Geingob is on record saying that we are a capitalist economy, you can't do this thing, we are a capitalist economy. But the Constitution says that we are a mixed economy. So this idea that because there's a generation of young men and women who are operating outside the form, they are actually shaking up the country. So then the capitalists and the defenders of the status quo must now survive. So inside the buildings, they open the windows and they put their heads out and say, guys, don't throw away the building. No, wait. Let's meet. Let's converge. Yeah, let's converge. Okay, I'll open the door so that you can come inside. But the young people are saying, hey, get out. Let's meet here in the street. So we must then have a conversation and say, where are we going to converge? Where are we going to converge? Because we've gotten a raw deal with these things about mixed economy. And I think we must disabuse ourselves mentally and also intellectually from these notions of over-celebrating achievements. Because the future generation, because why do we have 32 days account? Why do we have investment account? Is it because we are stupid, or is it because we can't manage our finances? No. We can be doing very well. But countries realize that there's a future that is coming. And the future is not interested on what Mo Ibrahim has said, on what other presidents are saying. We are saying here in Windhoek, in this capital city, yeah, regardless of, you hear conversation to say, no, I was born in Katutura, I saw how it was, look at how Katutura it is now. Okay? That generation can say that. But what is our generation saying? Our generation, I told you to keep quiet when I'm speaking. So our generation, this guy, basics of debate. Okay, our generation is saying by 2041, according to government own statistics, by 2041, Windhoek will have 800,000 Namibians. Currently, we are at 400. We are between 300 and 400,000. We have 130,000 households now. By 2041, we are going to have 300,000 residents. Regardless of whatever achievement, our preoccupation is not to say we have done this, Katutura is different now. We are interested in saying, for goodness sake, our population is going to increase. Every time I go to bed, I think, so in 2041, what is it that I can do as mayor and my colleagues there as councillors? What is it that we can do so that those 400,000 people that are coming, where are they going to be housed? What are they going to drink? What jobs are they going to have? What type of institution of higher learning are they going to have? So that is what traumatizes me as a young person that represents that generation. So let's not even waste our time about what has happened. It's because we are concerned about the future. So anybody that is more concerned about what happened in 1992 and what people and the pride and the prices and all those things should not stop us. We should not stop them from celebrating. They can celebrate at the Independence Stadium. Fine, let them do that. Maybe that's another form of convergence. But let's also be allowed to craft the future for ourselves and that of our children without being abused and being told, yeah, Katutura was different. We were young in 1990, you didn't see what was happening. Yeah. That is another form of convergence.
Shelley, just a quick one. Just a quick one.
No, Doctor. I will allow you the time to speak now. Let me just get to the point now. So what we're getting from the responses on social media is when we speak about, what we have seen, you have so rightfully admitted it's about the bread and butter issues. You have also said we want to get to the point of service delivery. We are in agreement with that. I think the ways in going forward, and I think it's the conversations that's happening in between to getting to the point of getting it done is where we are struggling. When will we get to a point where we go beyond conversations and going beyond this and that and my ideology and this political party and this association? When will we get past that and just get to a point of having practical solutions? I think that is where we're at, the practicality of it. And that's something you've touched on as well. So please do help us just unpack that quickly.
I think as a student of history, and I've also studied revolutions, when you look at a country or a nation, to be more idealistic, optimistic, a French philosopher, Ernest Renan, in 1882, he asked the question, what is a nation? A nation is the history which is made of defeats and victories. And I think it's important for young people who claim to prophetically represent the future to understand the history of this country in order to take it forward, because our history is our values. That's our history as well. It's our cultures. It's our resources that should allow you to take the combat forward. And as a young person, since as you define yourself by virtue of age, it's important to appreciate that, because it will help you to stand you in good stead to see what others have done before you, their successes, their mistakes, as opposed to focusing without reflection on just what they did not do. Because that will help you a lot. As a young politician, I think it's an important lesson. As a student of history, you call yourself a revolutionary, I grant that to you. It's important to accept that. Now, on the question of practicalities, I think it's a very, we should not pitch the conversation in such basic terms. Because, as I said at the beginning, to be a head of state is a very complex exercise. To govern a country is a very complex exercise. You deliver services through what maybe some don't want. You deliver services through your processes, your systems, and institutions. Because those are the arrangements through which service delivery occurs. President Geingob is the first to be impatient at times with the pace of service delivery. Is the first to tell ministers, government officials, mayors, that you have to do better. In 2019, we know what the president said. He said, I've had Namibians. Last year, even after the elections, the president said the same thing. He said, we have to focus on delivering services to Namibians. Yes, we have made progress. In a number of domains, we have excelled as a country in a number of domains. But the reality is, for as long as 33% of Namibians are unemployed, we have a problem. For as long as 44% of young people are unemployed, we have a problem. And that is the challenge of the day. And that is where our energies are deployed as we are thinking in terms of the future, the immediate future in terms of the Harambee Prosperity Plan 2. Our focus is on creating opportunities for a majority of Namibians. It's not a joke. It's not a spectacle. We are not about the gallery. These are serious matters. Namibians elected a president because they have confidence that he represents the best of who they are. That is not going to change. That might change. In 2024, you can run for elections and so on and maybe become president. But we have to respect the institutions of this country because they are the basis for our sustainability as a country. That's the investment in young people. Effective governance, which President Geingob talks about, which I think, in fact, the city of Windhoek, when you look at its annual plans, it talks about effective and efficient delivery of services. That language comes from the founders of this republic. It's not magic.
You asked for practical examples. Let me attempt to give you the practical examples.
Let me also just say that one of the viewers did indicate that the conversation most of the time goes to public institutions. Where does the narrative of the private sector come off? And those very private sector or the very private sector players are the ones who benefit of the masses. When are we going to change the focus on them without this fear of feeling like private sector will withdraw itself and then we will no longer have resources or money and jobs?
Let me answer in two ways. You asked specifically, and I'm not going to be very theoretical, I'm going to speak for the generation that wants change. From where we sit and where we stand, we are aware that, and in fact, yes, of course, he's talking about, the press secretary is talking about common responsibility and people to do better. We don't look at ourselves as Windhoek. We look at ourselves as we are running the country. The difference between the president and his press secretary is that we are in the same building. They're just in the 5th floor and we are on the ground floor. We are busy with our things here. And what do we mean by that in practical terms? Windhoek's GDP, and most people don't know this, Windhoek's contribution to the country's GDP is 31%. Not even Vaves Bio, where you have the cargo and things like that, just Windhoek alone. So by getting Windhoek right, you are making a contribution to about 1/3 of the country's GDP. So that is why we in fact, our approach and orientation toward the governance of Windhoek is one, to be able to be cognizant of the fact that we need to grow that contribution to the country's GDP. We need to find a way in how we grow that contribution to the GDP. And of course, at the center of that is economic recovery, because our economy, it's a horrible way of doing that. But you can't do that without being able to deal decisively with the onslaught of neoliberalism. That is why we will, over the coming days, would be able to be very clear in terms of what specific contribution are we going to make. We are putting up systems now.
You have a minute. We are over an hour.
Yeah?
We are
what is, so you guys are interviewing me at the same time?
No.
So anyway, what I'm trying to... Yes, what I'm trying to explain is that, of course, employment and housing, because our approach to housing is that we need to disabuse our people for looking at housing from this capitalist orientation. Yeah, to say affordability and things like that. Even a person, housing as shelter. And we look at housing as shelter. Once you provide housing and you provide dignity, what eventually flows out of that is an asset that goes to that individual family. So we want to be able to meet the needs of people at the point of need. That is why we have decided to rejoin the Association of Local Authority of Namibia. Because Windhoek, when Southwest Africa was running city of Windhoek, they withdrew. It's almost like a big brother leaving the house, leaving the siblings. So we decided to rejoin.
45 seconds.
If an investor comes here and he wants to do an agricultural project, we must be able to provide leadership to Katima Muliro and say, you have a lot of water, we are going to bring somebody there. You know, if somebody wants a project on tourism, we must be able to send them to Swakopmund and things like that. So, but if we don't change the fundamentals of the economy, yeah. So, if, for example, the question that somebody asked about the private sector, what is it that we need to do for our private sector? There are two ways of looking at the private sector. There's a foreign private sector that is supported and given exclusive access by this government, and there's a domestic private sector. In Marxism, it's called comprado bourgeoisie. You needed to have a patriotic business elite that could be engaged with the potential of job creation. For example, in the insurance...
1 second, doctor.
For example, in the insurance industry, we are dealing with, over the past 2 years, Holland, which is a 100% foreign company, owned by a company in South Africa, owned by another tax haven, takes out about close to 2 billion in 2019 and 2020. Took out close to, no, it took close to 2 billion in premiums from Namibians. It shipped out about 600 millions out of the country. Yeah? But Holland is the one, it had funeral covers for the old people, it get a lot of for soldiers and things like that by this regime. So what we need to be able to do here is that we need to instrumentalize the comprado bourgeoisie and assist them and not use this approach with the desalination and all these foreign capitalists that are being brought in here. It's the only way we can practically do something about it.
Thank you very much. We have come to the end of the conversation. A lot being discussed here, not getting to a point. And Doctor, I would love to give you guys each a moment to just end it, but it seems like we're not getting to the conversation, but we do have an agreement that service delivery needs to happen. Convergence need to happen. The way, though, the ideas behind it and how to push it is very different. That we have come to an agreement already. But I'm going to give you 1 second to just 1 minute to just conclude. And you, the same mayor, you, the same press secretary, please stick to 1 minute, concluding remarks, so that we can just let the people off this conversation.
I think I will start where I will conclude how I started. I think this is a very important conversation. There are no intra-generational tensions. That's complete nonsense. There's nothing like that in this country. There are no intra-generational tensions. Because the people who are leading this country, they are our parents, they are our brothers, they are our sisters. What is important is that we find each other in a manner that speaks to the scale of the challenges we are facing, and not to our persons.
5 seconds.
The centrality, which ought to emphasize the centrality of effective governance in taking this country forward, cannot be underemphasized. No platitudes, no slogans can be a substitute for effective governance.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Go on.
Yeah, firstly, I know President Geingob, you are watching, and please be easy on Doctor. It was not an easy debate for him, so don't. We still want to keep him there to inspire other people who prefer his lifestyle, so be easy on him. Number two, to the young men and women with talent and energy, be rest assured that we are not going to be diverted by anybody in this country. We are going to be very clear. We are going to change whatever it is that is not working. We are going to disrupt whatever it is that is not assisting our people. We are going to fight heads on, face to face, toe to toe, eyeball to eyeball, to ensure that everything in this country must work for us and must work for our generation. Everybody must understand that there's a generation of young men and women who are committed, and no amount of intimidation, no amount of radical will change whatever it is what we want to do. The future is going to be bright, not only in Windhoek, all over the country. The future is going to be bright. All of you are going to need sunglasses.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We do have very different opinions here, and this is what the conversation is about. Whether it brings out the good, the bad, or the ugly, this is what we ultimately want here. And as journalists, Ndabashali always says that we're building this nation one conversation at a time. Whether it's a good conversation, whether we'll have a few back and forward here and there, we are building it that way. Thank you very much for joining us, and please do remember to share this and also invite more to watch. It will be on our social media page for the next few weeks, so you can rewatch it. And from me, Shaligan, it is good evening.